I've had the most amazing opportunity to have an interview with the cast and director of Godless, the Eastfield Exorcism. It's a phenomenal psychological horror movie with great performances, a great cast, great script, and great direction. So I'm joined by Nick Kazakis, who's the director of Godless, the Eastfield Exorcism. Alongside him, Georgia Ayers, who's playing Laura Lavond, Dan Ewing, who's playing Ron Lavond, and Eliza Matengu as Dr. Walsh. And I hope you enjoyed the interview.
All right, I'll start off. I'm Nick Kazakis, and I'm the director of the film, Godless, Eastfield Exorcism. And to my right panel is Dan.
G'day, my name's Dan Ewing, and I play Ron Lavond.
Hello, my name is Georgia Ayers, and I play Lara.
What kind of research did you have to conduct to ensure an accurate portrayal of exorcism in this film? Because we all know that exorcism ain't the main pinpoint of the whole film itself. It's more psychological, it's more spiritual as well. So what kind of research did you conduct?
Yeah, it sort of went into like the early stages of lockdown. So we were kind of locked down for quite a while, more than most of the places in the world. And myself and the writer Alexander Anglis Wilson, we really wanted to do a exorcism film. But the more we were researching that kind of vibe, the more we started finding a lot of cases of people dying from exorcisms. So we did a lot of legal research. There was a lot of there's a lot of documentation out there, case by case, that's quite similar to what we've done because we're inspired by true events. And, furthermore from that, we did a lot of undercover research where we would attend churches, more of the charismatic, more of the extreme churches, to kind of get a feel of what was going on and how they were sort of portraying their religious faith and their beliefs. And yeah, that was our research. As for the actors, I'll let them speak for themselves, but I know Georgia wasn't really kind of keen or didn't really like too much horror. So I got her to stay away from a lot of exorcism films, so we didn't lean into the tropes of those. But I'll let her speak on her behalf for research.
Yeah, I guess Nick definitely still showed me a lot of terrifying exorcism videos, even though they weren't like horror films. And I think I was very much guided by the research that he had already done. And then once we kind of got to filming, it was trying to make it as natural as possible and not like some of the other exorcism films where it's like very, don't want to say over the top, but like very intense. Like we still wanted to keep it very natural and very real. But in regards to research, yeah, a lot of it was just listening to Nick and like the materials that he had collected. I'm sure, I don't know if Dan's similar, but.
I intentionally looked at precisely zero. I didn't want to be influenced by anything. But I did more so a lot of character research. So what I mean by that is I actually have an uncle who's a Catholic priest, and I spoke to him about do exorcists exist? Because you hear rumors of, there's one place in every diocese over here in Australia. And he was quite forthcoming with that information, which is quite interesting to me because I thought he might be a bit, oh no, it's just the movies or what have you. So I sort of leaned on him, and there's a proper training program and everything, so they're ready for these sorts of events that do occur. And that was sort of my mainstay of that was my mainstream of research. But no, I didn't sort of go through text, and I certainly stayed away from other movies.
And I think we got someone else in as well.
Special guest, Eliza.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm kind of in transit. I'm on holiday, so I'm just a bit, sort of cobbled together.
It's actually good timing because we were talking about the research that we put into the film and our characters in particular, Eliza, and just wanted to get your feedback because you actually helped shape a lot of this script. You and Dan put in a lot of feedback into this, but in particular, you did a lot of research from a psychologist's perspective.
Yes, I did. We had an intimacy coordinator who was also had psychological training, so I spoke with her a lot because I think before taking on the role, I wanted to make sure that because it's a female story, it's a domestic violence story, I would argue. And so I wanted to make sure that it was tackled in the right way, especially because a lot of the time George's character doesn't really have a voice in it. And so as the other female voice, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing or saying anything that was not treating the subject matter sensitively, even though it's, essentially entertainment. So I spoke a lot with yeah, with the psychologist, I did my own sort of research into like what the protocols could have been, because I think for me, especially on the first read of the script, I was just kind of blown away at how little my character could actually do. And as the person who I am, I'm like, no, I would do more. I would go in there and I would like, do all of these things. But actually, once you get into it, you know, no matter how well-meaning the individual is, it's actually the systems that are in place kind of tie your hands to be able to actually do you know, the things that I suppose the individual would want to do. So I think that's what kind of drew me to it. And once I uncovered that, I thought that was kind of an interesting thread that kind of went alongside the religious fundamentalist aspect to it. It was actually also, you know, the police, the psychologist, all of these sort of systems that are meant to protect vulnerable people actually are set up in a way that by design actually means that some of the most vulnerable people aren't able to be helped. So I think that's kind of what really sort of got me over the line.
Yeah, because I think that exorcism films tend to touch on certain elements of like the religious side of things when it comes to personal beliefs, but normally they touch upon broader, you know, religious issues and societal issues as well. But did you intend to make any of these social or cultural commentary through the entire film, and what themes did you explore and why?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. We definitely wanted to bring in a lot of the themes that are present in the film and throughout it. Like one big credit needs to go out to Tim Pocock, who plays our exorcist, and his situation is so unique. So we had already kind of had our casting almost set for that character, and then Dan thankfully recommended Tim because they had worked on a previous film together, and there was something in Tim's tape that was just so unique, and there was just like this duality to his character that we'd never kind of seen before. And it's because he grew up in Opus Dei, so he was part of a very, very full-on organized religion, and he you know, being that he is gay rather, within a structure that really kind of demonizes that, he was hiding who he really was. So we really wanted to play with a character that was really unsure of themselves. And a lot of the church members that we represent in this film kind of have that kind of bleeding through. So that's something that we really wanted to kind of push. Did I answer the question, or did I just go on a tangent about Tim?
There's that crush again.
No, to be honest, that's perfect, because honestly, I think that one of the performances I really enjoyed was from Tim. And normally in exorcism films, you'd feel scared from the demon, but I was more scared of Tim's character more than anything else, because it was just that uncertainty when he was slapping Laura, and you didn't know what kind of person he actually was. Was he using the idea of faith and his religion as a gateway to, you know, show off his psychotic tendencies? Because you didn't know if what he was doing he actually believed in it or not.
Yeah.
And I was going left and right. I didn't know if I should actually believe in him, that he thought that Lara was going to be resurrected or not, or he was just, you know, fulfilling his psychotic tendencies.
Yeah, there's actually a really kind of interesting sort of perspective on that. If you go back to the days of ancient Greece and all of that kind of side of things, a lot of those people back then believed that when they had love, it was the God of love that was speaking to them. So if they fell in love with someone, that was God speaking to them. And a lot of the things that Tim brought to this character was that any thought that he had was God speaking through him. So when he's suddenly panicking for some of the things that he's doing, he's reinforced by his own kind of paranoia to kind of push forward in another direction. So one of the big things is that he does genuinely believe in everything that he's doing. He's brought up in a situation where people are calling him the instrument of God. He is, a connection to God, that he can actually speak to him and God speaks through him. So a lot of that we wanted to keep present. And then the charisma is just some way, it's the other way of him just being able to win people over. It's just by seeing and this is again, it's unhealthy how much I compliment him, but seeing such a beautiful man you almost kind of gravitate towards, looking into his eyes and being like, I want to believe you. I want to believe what you're saying. So, yeah, he's going to love this podcast. He's going to love this. He's going to love this interview that we're doing, actually. So this is going to be great.
As a production designer, as someone who does costume and makeup, they made him look very suave, made him look very professional, made him look clean, someone that you would never expect to see that sort of performance from. And I like that juxtaposition as well. So it's quite cool that he brought something which I've never seen in an exorcism film. Normally you'd have a priest or some conduit of the church, providing that service, but he is totally the opposite of what you normally would expect. And I love that. So yeah, he was amazing there.
It was one of those real magic moments, one of those real serendipitous moments. Because I'd obviously worked with Tim before, but just knowing him as one of my closest friends, and if I lined up this amazing sort of character description that Alex, our beautiful writer, and Nick put together, and married it with Tim's childhood, it was almost the same. And even some of the photos, the character photos from some stories we were inspired by, it was almost like the spitting image. So. Please beat my language out, but I rang Nick and I said, I know the fucking guy. Like, I actually know him. I know this. I know him. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, I've got not only the actor look and ability wise, but he actually grew up like this. And it was just that you could, and just by chance, one of the other producers on the film actually knew him as well. It's one of those lightning in a bottle, serendipitous, the God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. It was absolutely magic. And he obviously, God. Is that you? Sorry. It was one of those magic moments.
This is actually, as much as this is an interview, this is a intervention for Dan, who secretly sent the script to Tim as well without us knowing. So we've got our lawyers contacting you soon about that. But it was good that he did, because I think you felt Tim out beforehand to be like, hey, this is something that I think you should put on your radar, and when they contact you, be ready for it. So it was kind of good that he did it. But yeah, Lauren's going to give you a call, our producer, afterwards, and have a chat about that.
Okay, I burnt it.
Yeah, no, because honestly, I did some research, not just about the film, but about all of you lot as well. So forgive me for doing that, but I just had to, because I knew Dan, and I recognized Dan from somewhere, and I couldn't put my finger on it until I looked through his IMDb.
Tinder.
Maybe. Home and Away is where I remember you from, because even though I live in the UK, Home and Away was a big part of my childhood. Weirdly enough, that and Neighbours, because I grew up watching these soap dramas. I was like, I recognize this guy, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And I was like, okay, now I recognize where he's from. And it was just like a nice sort of full circle, because I watched you as I was growing up, which is a bit weird in that sense.
Yeah, honestly, it's one of those shows. Like I talk about my time on that. Like I love that show. I love everything about it. Love the people on it. It's funny that a lot of actors come off that and they kind of, they don't want to talk about it, or they don't want to celebrate their time. It's been running for almost 40 years for a reason. It's the amount of incredible actors, not only actors, but directors, DOPs, writers that have come off Home and Away or come off Neighbours. It's an institution. So it's, I'm very grateful for my time on there. Who was your favorite character, mate? Just want to know.
You were.
Oh, you were. Just checking. I can tell.
It's got to be the River Boy.
I can tell.
No, it's amazing, because obviously watching your acting in that, and then watching you play the character Ron, and showing his fear and uncertainty throughout the entire movie. But were there also moments of where you felt like he had to show empathy and compassion, but also fear at the same time in what he believed in? Because it was almost like there was a sort of like a back and forth battle between himself, whether or not what he is doing is right, trying to help his wife, or whether or not he believes that she is truly gone. So how do you navigate a balance between the contrasting emotions to create a multi-dimensional portrayal of Ron?
Well, first of all, I was so grateful to Nick and to our writer, Alex. They were so collaborative with the character, and I was involved quite early on. I did a movie with an ex-professional rugby player who was a devout Christian. And I just found him such an interesting character, because he's a modern-day gladiator, right? He's basically almost killing grown men for a living, and he's just the most lovely guy, and but a man of faith, and a beautiful man, a beautiful husband. And I found that, but he's still a man's man. He still would have a beer with his mates, and didn't swear that much, but he still would, and it's just you wouldn't know. And I found that extremely interesting, and I wanted to explore that. And what it gave us was this vehicle of, look, I think sometimes the old trope is always a Christian, and you get or a Catholic, you get this choir boy image in your head, the parted hair, and it was just so interesting to sort of connect that dot with Ron, and not the cliche Aussie bloke, but we wanted to sort of connect that. And so by going down that path, it gave us an ability to go sort of in and out of. He's a man's man. He's a diesel mechanic, and he really, really loves his wife. And they're so happy together. But he's also a man of faith. What did he have his faith right away? Was he born into it? I think what we got to a space where he might have been a bit of a rat bag, and he found his faith later on. And I thought that was quite an interesting dynamic to play. But look, I think the character arc of Lara and of Daniel and Dr. Walsh, not that it was linear, but you can kind of see where it's going. So with Ron, it was just like he's in, he's out. He's a man. He wants to save his wife's life, but is it more important to save her soul? One of the really great little bits we got to put in the script was there's a physical altercation, because Ron's obviously physically a lot bigger than Daniel James King, and like his wife's being assaulted, it's being abused, and there's a moment there where I said he's a man's man. He's probably done some boxing, playing rugby. Is there a moment where he literally physically intervenes? I'm not saying this big over the top punch on, but Nick and Alex really liked the idea. And we just had that moment where he kind of grabs Daniel James King, picks him up and pins him to a wall. But such is his manipulation and his power that we sort of gets back into the process. But I thought it was important to put that moment in there because it's, I'm sure there's people at home going, why doesn't he just save his wife? No, it's okay. You got to save her soul first. So it was such a privilege to play Ron and have that collaboration, because it was tough. It was really tough. For me, I know what I would have done, similar to Eliza. It was a really, really tough thing to play, but it was so beautifully crafted by our director and our writers and our producers. So it was great.
Yeah, no, it was actually a great performance, because I actually felt like I was in the scene when you and Tim were literally going at each other, and he was literally trying to persuade you that this is the word of God, this needs to be done, and the whole scene was just meticulously created so well. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, no, it was a phenomenal piece to actually watch. But one thing I did want to know is, how did you actually prepare yourself to portray the emotional range and the complexity of the character, even during the most challenging scenes as well, such as the one with Tim?
Oh, for me, like I just been through, I'm quite sort of in tune with my emotions as the older I get. But I've just been through quite a big loss in my life, and I felt like because I'm the oldest sibling. My mother had passed away, so I felt like I sort of tried to sort of hold it in, and then just I knew once we got in that shed and we were going through this, how many page scene, we're in there for a week. I knew that could just be my vehicle and let it out. I've done that before with films, and I found it extremely cathartic. But so that was, and I just kind of, I don't like to decide how I'm going to play a particular line. I kind of let the emotion. I know my lines, and I know what the character how I kind of want it to go. But then I just kind of let it all go. Put all the ideas in the bag, tie the bag up, and then undo the bag. But it was rough. It was kind of going through all that process, and the loss of my mother, and then like working with such beautiful actors like Georgia and Tim. It wasn't faking it. There was no tear blower. Everyone was in the same boat. It was very real and very raw. But again, a strangely cathartic experience.
I'm curious to hear how Georgia answers this, because she had an interesting preparation up until the point that we were shooting. So how did you go about this? Did you ever come to my house? And
my preparation for what? What's this, Nick?
I guess even just for the character, right? That's what we're like trying to focus on, how you got into that space and how you kind of let that feed out. I'm learning a lot from our actors here, so this is great. Thanks to
I'm learning a lot from
setting
Dan.
this up. This
amazing.
is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome.
I don't know. I don't think mine's as interesting as Dan. I think I probably sound a bit crazier. I found it a lot easier just to click in and out, like between takes, like all of the shed stuff. Obviously, it was like heightened emotions, and it was very flaming. And then it was kind of like when we called cut on, lots of tears and crying and screaming. Once a cold cut, it was like okay, reset. It was the wiping away of the tears. It was Nick coming in to tell me what it was like. I think maybe that's why I felt obviously quite relaxed in the environment despite everything going on. But it's like definitely a preparation thing. It's like coming in prepared to change. But yeah, I think it was like kind of knowing where we're going with the character and where we're going with the scene, and then also just trusting Dan and Tim to kind of like guide each other. And yeah, that was really my whole process. It wasn't, I don't know, it just sounded fun.
But even when you were offset, you knew that like God hated you. So
yeah.
I mean,
That's true. Sorry, that's true. I was
we
very
had
much
some
cursed.
interesting stuff happen to Georgia specifically while she was offset. Like we got a great accommodation, and yet everything seemed to be going against her. You can tell them about the snakes falling from the ceiling.
It wasn't a snake. It was a centipede. I had a centipede. Fall from the ceiling.
You said snake. I heard snake. So
I did.
people don't forget.
No, centipede falling from the ceiling, and then they were, lowering and stuff were great and moving me, and they moved me to another place for one night, and I woke up in the morning and there was a spider on my chest. Meanwhile, Dan seeing a kidness walk past his front door and
wallabies,
having a
echidnas, wave to them.
Yeah, he was like, I don't know what's going on with your accommodation, but I'm having a great time. And I was like, that's really good, Dan. That's good. That's great. No, but yeah, so I definitely felt a little bit cursed on the film, and I tried to just think that it was all just a coincidence and it was all just fine. But yeah, I think a greater force is overlooking me, that's for sure.
I would consider that as a good omen when something bad happens on set, especially for horror films. I don't know why, because it means you must be doing something right in order for everything to go wrong. Like
we had such weird stuff happen on this. It's like even we had two editors on the film, Ash Lucas and Liam Kelly, and they're both amazing. But Liam was doing our dailies, and he started editing the first exorcism scene, and Lauren, our producer, walked in to check up on him and see how he was going, and he turned around and he had just blood pouring down his nose, and he'd never had a blood nose before, so he was just gushing. And then as soon as he finished editing, it stopped. So it was pretty freaky. That was pretty weird. Eliza, did you have anything that happened to you? I know you were wearing socks and slides one day, but I don't know if there was anything that was
you rock that though.
hell-worthy. But you could put
it was
Eliza
memorable,
in
obviously.
anything and she'll look
Talking about.
spectacular. I've got photo evidence.
Mine wasn't as dramatic as everyone else's, but I did when I logged into my I went into my accommodation, and I was just going to watch a movie at night, and my Netflix was already logged in, and it was logged into Jesus, which I thought was a bit interesting.
I remember that. That's right. That's right.
Do you remember, Nick, when we were doing the script, right from the start, the script read-throughs? Do you remember this story, Nick? So I walk out of our accommodation. We're in the middle of Melbourne, right? This busy laneway. And obviously, in big cities, sometimes there's people, like telling the word of their particular religion or whatever. And just this random guy, not saying anything to anyone else. I came out of my hotel, turned left, took about 3 or 4 steps, and a random guy just sort of stops me, puts his arm on my shoulder. And he's like, oh, do you believe in God? And I was like, well, my uncle's a priest. It's like, I don't really think it's a guy in a white cloud, but, I do believe we're all connected by some sort of energy force, depending on what you call it. He goes, I want to give you some coins, and these little silver sort of Christianity coins, right? And I just thought, isn't that funny? And I'm about to play a devout Christian, so I kept one next to my bed the whole shoot. That's probably why I didn't have centipedes dropping out of the ceiling.
Why didn't you share one with me?
I gave it to Nick. He was fine. I gave it to Nick.
Yeah, I was totally fine, except for that COVID scare, which is like a whole totally different other story, which I can go into later if you want.
It's like, I love these sort of stories when you hear on set that things just go wrong and there's some really weird spiritual stuff happening as well. And it's kind of like, wow, like, are we actually doing something which is good, or are we doing something which is bad? And it is quite profound in that sense as well. But the one thing I did want to talk about, especially with especially about the character of Dr. Walsh, which is very interesting for me, is because we haven't seen the psychiatrist's point of view in many exorcism films. So one thing I want to know is, how did you approach your understanding of the character's professional background and incorporating it into your performance? And did you have like any dilemmas in your performance, and how did you navigate them?
I had constant dilemmas, as Nick would know, because
It made the film better for it. I loved it. I think she thought I was getting off the phone with her, and I'm just like, again with this person. But I actually loved every bit of feedback she brought in. They were like, they're the exact holes that people, if we didn't do that research, people would poke apart, you know, on online forums and all that kind of stuff. So you're coming in with some good quality, but I'll make you feel guilty for it, so that way I can use it against you at a later date.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I think, you know, she sort of came from it as, like, I saw her as the eyes of the audience as well. So all of the questions that I was asking, I was thinking, this is what the audience are going to be like. Why isn't she, you know, but why isn't she doing more? Or why, you know, why isn't this happening or that happening? And also, I think as a psychologist, like, my job wasn't to judge either Georgia or Dan's character. And I think I found it quite difficult, especially with Dan's character and some of the, especially the earlier iterations of the script, where, you know, he'd be saying things and I'd be like, and so it was a big thing for me to get over myself, to go, well, actually, a psychologist's job is a mirror. So a psychologist's job isn't to have an opinion, and a psychologist's job isn't to judge. It doesn't matter who walks in through the door. So I had to sort of work, especially, it was easy to sort of want to help Georgia, but to want to work with Dan to help Georgia, which essentially is Dr. Walsh's job, that was kind of more difficult to get through. And so I think a lot of the talking to the psychologist and just kind of leaving a lot of my own self at the door, and also working with Nick as well to really understand, you know, what her function was, because she very much was just a kind of conduit of the story. Like, she didn't sort of have, you know, too much of her own, you know, arc going on. So it was really just to sort of help facilitate what was happening and to give that eyes of the audience to sort of almost like a little bit of an anchor, just to all the madness that was going on around, to have this sort of one person who's like, I don't think everything's okay. But to only be able to do that within the realms of the professional environment of that time, and that is, you know, with looking at, you know, doing the, you know, even though she gave her number, and even just that, you know, isn't really allowed. And so going to get the mental health check and having to go to the police station, and the fact that all of that is too late, like, all of that is just, it's all of that red tape and all of that, you know, admin that comes along with, you know, that job. And so I think what was interesting to me is how that, you know, maybe in other films that all of that would sort of happen a lot more dramatically, and maybe she could have broken in at the last minute and saved the day. But actually, in, you know, the horror of the film for me was that in real life, like, that it is all paper. It's actually horrifically boring how these things sort of eke out, you know, increment by increment, step by step, until the whole thing's kind of too late.
No, I felt exactly like I was saying before you even arrived. Like, I was very shocked at the ending, because, like, you know, most exorcism films, you normally have a new resolution, which is everyone being happy and the demon gets exorcised. But in this sense, I was waiting for the punchline for for Georgia to come back to life, and it actually worked. Like, oh my god, like, this is a miracle. But no, it's a true found horror that this is based on you know, real life events that actually happened, that people do die from exorcism films. And it's just quite heartbreaking that some people are so far gone spiritually as well, that they believe that they can bring back a human after after possession and after they pass away. And it's like, wait, is this actually real? Because there are moments in watching this film that I felt like I was shocked, because once you see Tim pulling apart Georgia's mouth and he's literally breaks her jaw, I was literally screaming. I was like screeching in my chair. I was like, no, this can't happen. This can't happen. And then literally the sound of silence, and everyone just comes to the realization, like, wow, he actually killed her. But he wasn't, I don't guess he realized, in a sense, he still thought that he was doing God's work. He was still working through Jesus. And it's like, wow, this guy has gone so far that he literally thinks that what he did is not wrong.
He was his biggest hype man. Yeah, he was his own biggest hype man. And then, just getting into that mode, he thought, okay, and then there's that line which is like I forget our own film, but it's like, it is done is the line, and it's just like, what's done? What are you specifically saying here? So like you've got to try and get the note behind the note. But yeah, it's a very heavy and a heavy kind of film to kind of watch. And one of the best reviews that we had got, it's like on Letterboxd, where someone's like, the team owes me a Xanax. It was just so funny to read that kind of stuff, because it is that pressure building. And where I am now, you mentioned the silence. I'm at Noisy Post, so this is where like all the sound happened, and it was a big point to kind of focus on the sound design to be very full and all the time. Kind of anytime Lara is being touched, you can feel that, like you really want to kind of hear all the fibers kind of going in every scene, and then suddenly we just cut that out, and then we're left overwhelmed with a scene. It's just like no one knows what to do, and that's a testament to Benny and the team at Noisy Post.
Yeah, honestly, I think the sound design and the score was phenomenal, because watching the film from beginning to end, when George is outside in the field, and she is dancing under the moonlight, fully nude, is like, wait, what? And then I was like, why is she doing this? Like, what's going on? Then you see Dan pick her up and take her inside, and then it comes full circle at the end that the person that she's dancing with is with Legion himself, and it's like,
Yeah.
wow, she's dancing with Evil himself.
But it definitely, obviously, there was a lot of conversation around as to the dancing and also just how connected she was to it. I would say, I mean, for me, the more terrifying thing was dancing with the literal devil, because the special effects makeup was so terrifying, and it was genuinely very terrifying. I would say that was probably more scary for me, obviously. But I think it was really beautiful because, as you said, it's like at the end, you kind of understand why she's having these moments. And at the start, it may seem like she's a bit unhinged, but by the end of it, you feel for the character, and you understand, I guess, her traumas and what's led her to that point in her life. But yeah.
Yeah, I got to give a shout out to Dmitry Golovko, who did the composing for this film. He did a lot of research. All of that is real instruments. He had this like crazy device that was like, it looked like a medieval kind of torture structure that he would use like a violin, whatever that thing. So the bow, yeah, that's right. So he'd use a bow. Wow, I don't know basic things anymore. He'd use a violin bow, and he'd kind of like start rubbing it against these like metal kind of like pins, and it was just wild. And like the beauty behind his composition and score was that he created themes. So like when Daniel James King is around, you hear a constant theme that sort of comes up. When you hear the congregation, that theme comes back, and he manipulates it enough to feel original and different, but it's always sort of the undercurrent is always there. And Lara always had a theme, especially when she was going into her, bouts of schizophrenia. She would have this theme creep in, and it's really good signposting that he designed. And I actually, I was quite confident with everything that going forward, but the score was always like a real tricky one. And when he sent me his first pass, I actually felt like a bad director because I had no notes. I was just like, do I have no notes because I don't know anything anymore? Or is it because he just like absolutely smashed it? And I'm like, hey man, I don't have any notes. And then I provided one note. And then I quickly called him after. I'm like, hey, I'm taking that back. I'm going against my own thing. It's locked. And he's like, great. I'm like a week ahead. So it was really good to see him like work and just play it back for me. And it just shaped the film. It made what was one film turn into a totally different film.
Yeah. No, I agree, because the motifs for the score was really important for me, especially in horror movies. And like I said, at the end of the movie where Tim breaks Georgia's mouth and the silence falls, but then you hear the undercurrent of the score, it kind of gives you like a light-hearted sort of string, and you're like, okay, this is like a really sad moment. And then the minute Tim opens his mouth and said, it is done, the cellos and everything just goes higher, and it's like as if he just undone the realism of the scene, meaning he thought he did something right, and we thought as an audience members like, wow, he's killed her. But then when he's opened his mouth, he's just ruined the entire moment, but in a good way though, as his character, because he's so deluded in what he did.
Yeah, yeah, and you actually hear that in the score as well. Like you said, that there's that pitch shift where it just goes, and suddenly we're like, "Oh no, he's really unhinged." So then we really throw like highlight that point as much as we can.
Yeah, no, I love the score. The score was phenomenal. But one thing I did want to talk about is the visual effects and intense imagery as well. So as Georgia is dancing with the devil himself or the evil himself, but how did you balance the use of like special effects to enhance the story while maintaining the sense of realism as well? Because we know there are a lot of exorcism films out there that show people going flying over the room, or we see like pans and forks and tables flying everywhere as well. But was there any like visual motifs or symbolic elements that you added in to enhance the story while maintaining visual and intense imagery as well?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There was like a lot of gothic imagery that we leaned into, and the times that we do that and when it's super stylized in the film is when Lara's in her own world, when she's in that world of schizophrenia and hypomania. We really kind of over stylize that, even to the point where there's a section when she's running in the woods and you see those fiery embers that she's following into the point where she's going to meet the devil. There's a moment where there's a point of reality. So anything through Lara's perspective, we see fiery embers, but something that's happening in reality outside of her, in particular when Ron is running through the forest, there's no fiery embers. When her dress gets caught on the tree stump, there's no fiery embers. So we've kind of got like little Easter eggs like that to show that it's not real and it's not in reality. So we played around with a lot of that. And then the rest of the film, we whatever is real, we kind of took a docudrama approach to it to make it feel like you're in that situation, such as the congregation session that only Dan out of the three of our beautiful actors here got to experience the wild setting in that church. But we shot that so kind of handheld and loose because we really wanted to feel like we were in there and have that claustrophobia. So those are the two things that we really wanted to focus on when we were in a state of, it wasn't right. We really over stylized it. And when we were back in reality, it felt grounded.
Yeah, no, I agree. That opening scene was kind of weird because I felt like I was there. The use of handheld just kind of gives you that unsettling sort of atmosphere as well, as everyone is actually preaching about God and Jesus, and you think, wow, this is a bit too much for me. Like I felt a bit uncomfortable, like how far they were going, and of course the Dan's character as well, just sitting there, just trying to take everything in and realizing that his wife at home needs this sort of help, and he is trying to go to Dr. Walsh and trying to get that signature off so he can get like a proper exorcism. But of course she doesn't, and he ends up going off the rails and doing something very unconventional and getting Tim's character involved. And it's like, is this like real life in which a lot of people are desperate to do these things because they don't have no other options? It's surprising how well you've actually delved into the reality of the situation, not a Hollywood approach, but more authentic approach as well.
Yeah, and that's one thing that actually Eliza sort of brought up in the early stages as well, and also reminded us when we did our premiere in the States. It was it's this situation of like Ron, and this like we'll throw to Dan for this as well, but it's like Ron can get like the right answer, but it takes a lot longer, and he's seeing his wife suffering, and or he could go the fast route. And the fast route is to like get this spiritual man in who is connected to God that could fix her like that. So that's something that we really played with. Is that how you felt it, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of imagine it in the sort of backstory stuff I did in my mind. There's that connection with Ron and Barbara, that certain like motherly character. So whatever Ron had been through in his past, this particular church and this motherly figure and his relationship with God had worked for him. So he truly trusts Barbara. So there's that aspect, but yeah, it obviously didn't work. It didn't work out too well for Lara. Oh my goodness!
And also, if I could just add, in terms of it's like everybody is sort of well intentioned, including Ron, in that he genuinely wants to help Georgia, and it's that idea of people who fall through the cracks. And so when he comes to Dr. Walsh, he's not getting he's not feeling heard or understood. And so then when he goes to Barbara, she's saying, I hear you, I understand you, and I've got this solution that's going to help you. And I think that's how these sorts of groups and how these things happen, is because people, it's like how Donald Trump ends up in power. It's because there's a large body of people who don't feel heard or understood, and then someone comes in and offers them a solution and says, look, I get you, and this is your problem and this is your solution. And it all becomes very simple and very clear. And that's how these things sort of happen, and these congregations sort of exist, and those extremities get sort of pushed and pushed and pushed. Is all people like wanting a solution to their problems and their pain, and they just want it to go away. And unfortunately, in that vulnerability, they're just able to be taken advantage of. And essentially, Ron is taken advantage of in a sense, because if he was in a different place with a different group of people, a different solution would have been offered, which wouldn't have ended up in.
And that was really important to me. Sorry, go for it. Sorry, Lisa.
I was going to say, so that was like a really important thing when I was working with, like trying to work with Ron as the Doctor, to sort of try and empathise with his character and not just be like, this guy's just is that to try and see it through his lens, which again I think is an interesting take from Nick's perspective, in that it's like not having this like cartoon sort of goody and a baddie and an evil and a devil, and it's like bringing in all of those human elements and trying to give a humanity to all of the people, no matter how awful the things that they're doing or what's and that's what kind of makes it again even more horrific, is just the humanity of it.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to me was the relationship with Ron and Lara. You needed to believe and feel that he truly loves his wife, and they are in love, and they're just in this horrible situation. I think some of I love where we got to. But I also love the early drafts, but there was a little bit more Ron throwing the toys out of the cot when like he met resistance from Lara. And a little bit more, I guess we could say misogynist, but like with that sort of, using religion, sort of, it was a bit more, I don't know, it was a bit more, I found it hard to connect with him in that way, because I was like, but you're making it about you, it's got to be about your wife. And then with Elisa's input, I just thought it was amazing. We got to this very gritty, very real piece, and it's not really a horror film. It's much more a true crime story, much more a drama with supernatural themes. I think that's why we've got such this incredible response. That's why we're talking to you, Ty. It's like it really does affect people, and I think it's because in my opinion, it's because of that realism, because of the work, and you really do believe each and every one of these characters.
Like I said, watching exorcism films, they all have a very common theme and typical tropes as well. But the way that Nick directed it and the way he went about it is very unique for a director's point of view, that he wants to create sort of a dilemma between the audience members and what they're watching, whether or not they believe it's real, because this is more lifelike and more based on reality than what we've seen in previous exorcism films. Yes, it's based on real life stories of people getting exorcised in in the UK or in Australia, in the US. But this delves deep more into the psychological side of things, and whether or not people do believe they are possessed, or if they do believe that there's a hand of God to actually, disrupt this entire exorcism. And it just makes me realize that these type of movies are needed. And it's just a shame that no one else is not even thinking about it. But the fact is, Eula have gone down that route is actually phenomenal. And that's why I actually really enjoyed it. Even the trailer, I just wanted more. And the fact is, Lauren actually gave me a preview screen, and I watched the film twice now. Once,
awesome.
Yeah, so I had to watch it twice. The first time I watched it just for the sake of watching it, because I want to know about it. But the second time I, dissected it, learned more about the motifs, the symbolism, the character arcs, the stuff that you implemented as actors, and it's just a phenomenal thing, to be honest. That's why I like doing what I do, is because I get to talk to people like yourself and just pick your brains and just figure out why do you do what you do. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all thanks to you, really, that we're in this situation. Like we mentioned it before we started the interview, but it was like I saw your trailer reaction, and it was just one of the best things that I'd ever seen. And then I shared it around to everyone, up to and including Lauren. And then I'm like, I'm going to touch base with him. So then I stalked your Insta and private messaged you. Maybe I shouldn't encourage that for other people down the line who are probably going to do the same. But it was good that you got back to us. And no, it's really humbling to hear that you loved the film and enjoyed it and understood the perspective that we were trying to get to, because it is a very polarizing sort of film. Like, it's not your, like, the title says exorcism and people think, yeah, there's going to be like people's heads exploding and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, well, and someone brought that up to me. They're like, are you worried with the title exorcism? It's like, no, because there's actually an exorcism taking place. We're just doing it from a real perspective, and it's like, this is our story. We're not denouncing anybody else. We're talking about the extremism that we're witnessing that's happening to this day. Like, even though we're set in the 90s, it's actually gaining popularity, and there's a lot more people dying and getting brutalized from exorcisms now than there was before. So it's like, it's pretty full on. So like, we wanted to kind of highlight that injustice and, take that road.
But one question I had for Georgia, though, is that being the main person who's getting the demon exorcised from her so-called demon, but what was your inspiration? Like, did you watch anything beforehand? Did you take inspiration from any other psychological or exorcism films? And was there a reason why you wanted to add those psychological elements and the emotional elements into your character through the movie?
I think it was extremely collaborative with Nick, obviously, and I'd already known him from previously working with him, not with a feature, just music videos, so very different medium. But I think, yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of inspiration honestly came from the stuff that Nick had sent me, but also I didn't really, similar to Dan, I didn't really want to watch too much stuff, because I feel like then I'd kind of just get confused and it would be this wish-washy portrayal that I didn't really want to do. So I kind of really just focused on what Nick wanted, what the relationships were between Dan's character, Tim's character, and all of that, and just really focused on that rather than trying to, I guess, mimic other people's performances in other exorcism films.
Did you not do any method acting, or was it just like on the day we just come in, read a script, and just get it out there?
Yeah, I don't think I was very method at all. But
well, I hope
I
not.
don't know. Maybe Nick could say I was. I don't know.
Oh, she's so difficult. Like, she wouldn't eat. No, it was actually really good. I was actually telling her not to eat so we could slim her down for, like, so that she could look unhealthily thin, because she's very thin. All right,
cancelled. Nick Cancelled.
Yeah, I'm over now. No, but like, I wanted her to be like really unhealthy. And then obviously makeup exists, so Tanya would actually help her like really kind of bring out the cheekbones and make her look like she hadn't slept for a long time. So I was just calling her at 3 a.m, trying to keep her up at night. No, it was no, I had a really lovely cast on this. Like, everyone was just awesome. No one went down the method path, even to the point where it's like, I was getting script notes from Eliza. I was getting like some feedback from Georgia, and Tim was helping us guide his personal experiences. And then even Dan, who has worked on, like, a lot of these people have worked on major stuff, but Dan had just come off a really, really massive few productions, and he was even guiding me in between takes or when the camera wasn't on him, like just like basic set etiquette, which is like, I come from music videos and I've done a feature before, but that was really, really independent. And he'd kind of come up to me and be like, hey, let's try and like get the mood going so that like Georgia can focus and all that kind of stuff. And it was really helpful to have that kind of element of experience. And yeah, it was awesome. Like, everyone just, no one was method. I didn't have to tiptoe and just kind of be like, hey, am I speaking to Daniel James King right now? And like, are you going to slap me across the face or throw water at me? No, it was awesome. It was so good.
That's hard too. With a film with this sort of subject matter, that sort of thing is really difficult, and it's dangerous. It can be very dangerous, So, and look, I felt Ron was being quite useless towards the end of the film, so I was trying to help Nick out, trying to help Georgia. I couldn't help Lara, but I was trying to help Georgia, as much as I could.
No, that makes perfect sense, because I would have imagined that if you're going to go with the full method acting, I think a lot of bad things would have happened on set, especially with Tim. I think he would have taken it a bit too far. But aside from that, the one thing I did want to ask from like a production standpoint is that were there any innovative or unconventional techniques used in the film production or storytelling that any of you can actually touch on?
I think some of the few things that we did have, aside from getting Georgia actually cursed and having her use that, we used a lot of, like I said, the sound design stuff that we kind of played with to enhance a lot more of it. But one of the big things from me as a director with the cast is I went to every single one of them and gave them validity for their character. I didn't, and this is something that Eliza brought up earlier. But it's just like I didn't go up to Ron and say, "Hey, you're like neglectful husband, yeah," like, or you're just going to talk over her because this, and that. Like, I'd go up to him and be like, "Hey, she can't get the words out. Try and help her. Try and like get her over the line. You need it. There's a timely method here." And then that reads differently when we're focusing on Lara, and I go over to her and say, I go over to Georgia and I'm like, "He's cutting you off. He's not letting you talk." And so then suddenly there's like natural conflict between those two characters where, and then Tim as well. I'm like, "Hey man, just look at this person that's in front of you. It's no longer a human. It's 3-4 different creatures that are inside of her." And he really felt that validity, especially after he throws holy water on her and she's reacting in the way that she is. He's finally seeing a demon come through, and he gets that kind of validation that he needs to go, all right, this is no longer bringing a knife to this fight. I need to bring a shotgun, and that's exactly what I like, the directing technique that I brought in for this. As for our performers, let's
Just quickly, I got to
give.
say, like as far as conventional, we could have done this on a sound stage or a big set, but we to actually get taken to a beautiful town called Dalesford, and they just looked after us so well. To actually be in a small town, just for me, like that doesn't always happen on films because they want to, you're putting people up in in a small town. It doesn't quite always work. Although I want to build some sort of version of a small town, that's sort of all fake. To be in a beautiful, quirky little town like Dallas, a big g'day to everyone down there. They looked after us really well. That's not all. That's not really unconventional, but it doesn't always happen. And I, for one, loved being down there. It was great.
Yeah, but I'd also just sort of add that, working on an independent, smaller budget film, and especially with the content, I was a bit like, oh, is it going to feel safe? Are people going to feel, because it's quick. Like, I think it was 24 days, 21 days, 3 days pickups. Like, that's quick. And so I was like, oh, we're going to be doing 20-hour days. Everyone's going to be stressed. It's going to be had all of these sort of preconceptions of that, that layout. But it was Nick. I don't think we ever, well, on my days anyway, we were always finished on time. We had had our breaks, and the atmosphere was. I was there at the beginning and right at the end, and at the end, everyone had the same energy at the beginning. There was music playing. It felt like a real team, collaborative. Like everyone was so happy to be there. Everyone was focused on their jobs, and it was just an absolute sort of joy to be a part of. So I just want to add that.
Yeah, and Lauren, Tim, and Tony, our producers, they really kind of, really focused on making sure that everyone was safe and that we had everything pre-planned so that we weren't going in quite rogue. So that was like one really important thing to kind of take into consideration. Also, Carlia was a weapon who was our first assistant director who just kept us on time. So we only went over like a couple days by 30 minutes, and that's nothing in the scale of film. And that was only due to safety. So it's like we wanted to make sure that everyone was safe, and we were doing car rigging, and, we had like cars skidding and explosions and all that kind of stuff. So it was just like, on those days, the 30 minutes was justified. But everyone was like really cool to hang out with afterwards. Like we had such a family kind of environment. Like as soon as we wrapped, people wouldn't go home, which was great. Like, even Dan would bring beers to set and all that, and people would drink afterwards and just kind of kick back. So it's like everyone enjoyed being a part of it. At least that's what I saw, and that's my own reality. I don't know if that was anyone else's, but Georgia, what about you? How'd you feel about it all?
Great. I don't think the energy ever. Great. No, I think no. Exactly what Elise was saying. It's like I don't shifted as like it never. I don't think I ever really. I'm sure a lot of stuff happened behind the scenes, but in regards to moods, like everyone was always keen for the next day. It's like even if it was a long day, I think because, as you said, Carlia just ran such a tight ship that we kind of knew that we would hit everything that we needed to hit. And if we didn't get it, then we'd get it somewhere else. We'd pick it up some other time. But it never felt stretched. And as a, like, acting in it, I never felt like I was rushed, and especially with an exorcism film, the last thing you'd want to feel is like acting perspective, to not feel rushed, and yet I'm sure it could have been chaos. Okay, can you just hurry up? Can you just get those tears going right now? So that was nice from that.
No, but honestly, thank you all so much for that. It's actually a really nice way to even delve into the idea of filmmaking. Even though I work in the film industry, it's just nice to speak to people who do the things that I always wanted to do as well.
No, thank you so much for having us. Like I said, it's so amazing to see you do your thing. And I'm like, I just joined TikTok just so that I could watch your reacts. And
I appreciate that.
And that's not even a lie. Like I literally have like 12 people following me, and I'm following 2 people, and you're one of them, and my dog is the other one. So it's like, you know, it's really awesome to see you do what you're doing. It makes the film industry fun. It makes film making fun, and I'm glad that, you know, the plus side and the bonus is that you like the film and that you had the time to talk to us. It's just really cool.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for all of that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And if you like what you see here, please subscribe, share, comment, and follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And hopefully I get to see you in my next video.